Hi everyone, my name is Huang. I'm a PhD student from the University of Michigan. Today I'm presenting our study, Biases and Differences in Code Review using Medical Imaging and Eye Tracking, Genders, Humans, and Machines. First of all, I would like to thank all of the authors of this paper, including our undergraduate researcher, McKay, our psychology collaborator, Dr. Tyler Santander, and my advisor, Professor Westley Weimer. Specifically, I want to point out that Dr. Leach, Dr. Sharafi, and myself are on the academic job market this year, so please feel free to contact us if you're hiring. In software engineering, code review is a very critical activity, which refers to the systematic inspection, analysis, evaluation, and revision of code. In code review, you will need to read others' code changes and decide if they should be merged into the code base or not. The latent defect discovery rate of formal code review can be as high as 60 to 65%. Usually when we think about code review, we are probably thinking about a pull request like this. We can see the details of the code changes and a commit message or a comment explaining the purpose of the changes. If everything works well, we're supposed to make our decisions in code review based on this information. However, research in the past has found that developers spend a considerable amount of time on social signals in code review, such as the picture of the author. Moreover, they may not even recognize the attention they paid to these signals and the potential effects of biases when performing code reviews. Large-scale analysis of GitHub pull request data found that the gender identities of authors may affect the acceptance rates in code review. Furthermore, in recent years, not all code changes are generated by humans. Automated program repair tools are already deployed in industry, like Facebook's SIGSOFT. This means we may also need to review code changes that are made by machines or tools and not just by humans anymore. However, many developers express reluctance about incorporating these machine-generated patches into their code bases, regardless of the code quality. All of these potential biases against the genders and identities may affect the efficiency and efficacy of code review, but have not been systematically studied, especially with the controlled experiments and the cognitive evidence to fully understand how biases affect the code review. This lack of fundamental and systematic understanding hinders the development and assessment of strategies to mitigate productivity and quality losses from biases in code review. So in this study, we want to answer the following high-level questions. Is there bias on gender and identities in code review? How do we characterize the bias? More importantly, can we provide a systematic, objective, and rigorous solution to answer these questions for modern code review? Thus, we use experimental control and multiple measures to investigate behavioral differences. How do participants make acceptance decisions, as well as visual differences? What and how do participants check information available in code review? And neurological differences. Can we tell any difference from patterns of brain activity among participants? In the rest of the talk, we'll discuss our experimental design, results, and conclusions. The high-level idea of experimental design is we will ask participants to review a set of pull requests with different author identities. We want to know if and how the author information affects the participants' decisions based on different measures. We'll record each participant's decision to accept or reject each pull request and response time, how long it takes them to make the decision, to analyze behavioral differences. We use the eye tracker to record participants' visual attentions to analyze the visual differences. What do they look at in code review? Eye tracking can provide us information of visual focus, like fixation and saccades. We will mainly care about fixations, which indicates the attention of human eyes. Saccades are this movement spatially, which are not really meaningful. We use fMRI to analyze neurological differences. We choose to use fMRI because from the literature in psychology and neuroscience, there are certain brain regions that are associated with bias and discrimination, like the amygdala, which is deep within the human brain. We need strong penetration power to detect those regions, so other technologies like FNIRS would not be appropriate. With the goals of our study established, we next discuss careful task design. For example, we're studying the biases from genders and identities. How can we control the variables of author information except for genders and identities? There are many of them. Such variables include the races, ages, attractiveness, and the facial expressions of the authors. How to fit everything with the constraints of experimental environment, especially when we use medical imaging and eye tracking. We only have limited time and we cannot use the same computer setups as usual. How can we make sure that participants are not solely deciding whether to accept or reject a patch based on code quality? Here's how we tackle the challenges in our task design. First, we include 60 real-world pull requests from open source C or C++ projects on GitHub. These 60 pull requests consisted of 20 code review stimuli adopted from a previous fMRI study, and 40 pull requests obtained from the top 60 start C or C++ projects on GitHub. We picked the ones that can fit in the screen to adapt to the monitor in the fMRI machine. An example is shown here. For each of the 60 pull requests, we relabeled the author information using human pictures from the Chicago Face database. When we select the pictures, we controlled race, only white people's pictures are used. We controlled age, only from 22 to 65. We use only average attractiveness and neutral facial expressions. The examples of men and women's pictures are shown here. To indicate a machine author, like the APR tools, we use an avatar of a computer. With the 60 pull requests and the author images, we construct the code review stimuli by combining the pull requests and author images randomly. We use 20 author images of women, 20 of men, and also 20 avatars of computers. To control the quality of code, we generate another version of stimuli using the same set of pull requests and author images. We make sure each pull request is labeled with a different author image in the two versions. A stimulus example is shown here. We also put an indicator image to remind the participants which fMRI button to use to accept or reject the pull request. Considering every stimuli in fMRI can only be shown around 30 seconds, following the findings in previous work, we prevent a 5-second loading image that briefly introduces the purported author before each stimulus. Then the remainder of the time shows the review sample. Though we have solved the challenges for stimuli, we need to avoid the social desirability bias in the experiment. We cannot tell them we are investigating the effect of author info in this study. So we deceive our participants. At the beginning of experiment, we need to tell them this study is to investigate how software developers conduct code reviews. All of the pull requests are from real-world software projects and development teams. Some of the pull requests are generated by computer programs, and we don't tell anything else to them. Accordingly, also required by IRB, we need to debrief the participants at the end of the study. We need to tell them all the truths. We need to tell them that all of the pull requests are made by human developers. None is generated by machines. And all the profile pictures are randomly assigned. They are not the real authors of the pull request you're reading. In this study, we recruited 37 participants, 20 are male, 16 are female. The population also includes both undergraduate and graduate students. We semi-randomly assign each participant a version of stimuli with the intention to keep a comparable number of participants on gender and education level for each version. So each pull request is reviewed by all participants with at least 2 different author labels. Also, the mathematical analysis incorporates the effect of pull request complexity at the same time. The final distribution of participants is shown in the table on the slide. After conducting all the tasks, but before debriefing, we asked them 6 free response questions regarding how they conduct code reviews in our experiment, or just in general. For example, we asked them questions like, how would you compare the machine-generated code changes versus the human-generated changes in the experiment? And do you think there are any difference between code written by men and women? Finally, we present our findings regarding 4 research questions. We will talk about them one by one. Our first research question is, how do the identities of code reviewers and authors change or bias the code review process? Is there any behavioral difference? After investigating the joint effects of pull request author and participant identities on response time and acceptance rate using linear mixed effects model and statistical tests, we found that the gender identity of the reviewer has a significant effect on response time. Universal biases exist. All participants spend less time evaluating the pull requests of women. All participants are less likely to accept the pull requests of machines. Furthermore, women reviewers spend significantly less time on all pull requests than men. All results reported here are significant. Our second question is to investigate if there's any visual difference in code review. Can we differentiate the gender identity of code reviewers based on their visual attention patterns? By analyzing the eye-tracking data, we found that men and women participants employ different high-level problem-solving strategies in code review. Men fixated more frequently, while women spent significantly more time analyzing pull request messages and author pictures. This figure shows the distribution of the time participants spent on different information in code review. The heat map here can give you an intuition about how reviewers' visual attentions look like between different genders and identities of both reviewers and authors. The warmer the color is, the longer time the reviewers spend on the location. Research question number 3 is, can we classify the gender identities of code reviewers based on patterns of brain activities? Is there any neural level differences? We use the Gaussian process classification in the fMRI data analysis. We find that men and women conduct code reviews differently in terms of associated cognitive processes and the patterns of neural activation. Relative to women reviewers, men show less consistent differences in their responses to women versus men-authored pull requests. In our study, we on purpose involve deception in the protocol. We don't tell the participants that we are actually checking how author labels affect decision-making in code review. We also don't tell them all the author labels are fake. After conducting all the tasks, but before they are told the true study goals and design, we ask them to compare the machine-generated code changes with the human-generated changes. We also ask them to compare between men and women reviewers and authors. From our findings before, we already know that objectively, humans exhibit biases in their acceptance rates of identical code labeled as written by men, women, and machines. However, participant self-reports only acknowledge the bias against machines, but do not acknowledge gender bias. Also, when pull request author information changes, participants report seeing quality differences where we know none exist. An example quote from our participant is, machine-generated changes are, in my opinion, less readable, a little worse in quality, capable in fewer scopes. But actually, all our code reviews are generated by human. In summary, we present a controlled experiment using both medical imaging and eye tracking to investigate bias and differences in code review, including both human and machine authors. We find universal biases in how all participants treat code reviews on the behavioral, neurological, and visual level. We also find that participants' self-reported perception of decision-making in code review do not align with the objective observations. Thank you.